let me put this in the side notes here for everybody that is listening that doesn't know my style, Matt's style. This is a shame and blame free zone. I have a very dear friend. If he's listening right now, he'll get a kick out of this. Nobody goes to rehab sober, is what he says. And for people who are getting business coaching, people who are seeking help, your shit is sideways, and you're just like every other business owner out there, and that's okay. The point is you're here doing something about it, and so there's no room for shame and blame. That's not productive. It's not constructive. The question that sort of like pokes a hole in that is to say, great, do you know what got you here, and what are you going to do about it? So that's a great way to sort of let the air out of the shame and blame balloon and move forward. So I just want to kind of give that context for when I am like, so Andrew, how did this get off track? This isn't laced with shame and blame. This is diagnostic. I want to throw that out there. Welcome to Clearing Obstacles, the podcast for leaders and those that want to be. You know, it can be a lonely journey when you find yourself confronted by challenges in business. So get ready to take a journey with me as together we'll hear the stories of real-life business owners and begin to unpack some common business challenges from real-life situations in a way that's both relatable and actionable for you. We bring to bear decades of entrepreneurial and coaching experience and a full toolbox of resources as we introduce you to those professionals who, like yourself, are working hard to build a healthy business and a healthy team. But then we'll also share the way out of those struggles by clearing the obstacles at their origins, helping you get there from here.
Welcome to the Clearing Obstacles podcast, where we help you get there from here. This is Coach Matt along with Coach Dan and our esteemed guest, Andrew. Welcome, Andrew. I want to thank you for coming to share your story with us. How's it going today? What's it like in beautiful Steamboat, Colorado today?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's a beautiful day. T-shirt weather, we like to say, about 15 degrees, and just been an awesome winter. One of the best in a decade. So we are living the dream and loving every bit of it.
Best in a decade. Is that how long you've been there?
So we've been here about 2 years and lived in the Denver metro before that.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Gotcha.
The T-shirt weather at 15 degrees, right?
Yeah. See, I'm in the short sleeve.
You are. Well, I think everybody here at one point or another has lived in Colorado. So we'll just shout out to our stomping grounds. Every one of us actually has lived there for at least a minute.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a very impactful place.
Well,
absolutely.
It is, isn't it? What do you mean by that? I know how I interpret that. What do you mean by that, Andrew?
You know, for me, I think, I was brought into the Colorado world by my wife. We had lived in Houston, and she got to a point where she said, "Hey, look, if we stay in Houston any longer, we're gonna, there's almost no chance we're gonna leave." And she said, "Let's go to Denver." And it's like, okay, didn't visit. We were at that peak of the 100,000 a year moving into the Denver metro, and never looked back. And since then, it's really captured our hearts, and there's something about it that, every state has its thing, and Colorado has this mystique about it that everybody can relate to, right? Whether it's the vacations, it's the kind of that easy lifestyle. So it's definitely impacted us in a lot of positive ways.
That's great. How do you think it may have impacted the way your business has taken shape if you had launched it and built all of that in Texas versus there in Colorado?
Man, what an awesome question. So in so many ways, but the number one is the lifestyle focus. So let's say, we're back in Houston, we're building a similar company, which is, property care. It would be, for an employee to say, "Hey, I want to go ski half a day," people or go bike half a day, or whatever that recreation would be in Houston, people would look at them and say, well, what? Like, there's no, that doesn't make sense. But there's such this pride of having this balanced lifestyle here between, exploring your hobbies and making it all work through business or a job or, whatever your occupation may be.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's like the service. The waves are high today. I can't come in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We call it the powder clause.
Yeah.
Powder clause. I like that. Right into the language of the contract.
I love it. That's beautifully said there. That makes a lot of sense too. I can see that for sure. Yeah. So you alluded to it in what you said right there too. So tell us a little bit about your businesses that you operate in Steamboat.
So like I mentioned, we had moved to Denver about 7 years ago and loved it. But where we got to an impasse was, we moved to Denver with this idea that, we were going to be living in the mountains and just, always riding bikes and hiking and skiing. And the reality was that even though we were privileged that we could, go up to the mountains any day of the week because of our schedules, it was still, it's an hour drive here, 3-hour drive there. And so that kind of tainted our enjoyment of everything we, moved to Colorado for. So we saw a business opportunity. There was a business for sale in Steamboat. It was a property management company. And we started looking into it and we said, man, this is right up my alley. I grew up on a working ranch in Texas. And so our motto was, if it's broken, you fix it yourself, right? You don't call the plumber, you don't call, the contractor. You just do it. And so with that, I thought, wow, this matches my skill set and a lot of my, knowledge and comfort. And we really wanted to grow a business, but also wanted to have a really good lifestyle and start setting up for a family. And had already joked about moving to Steamboat. And, the stars aligned and, we closed on the business. There was about 50 within 2 months, there was 50 interested buyers in this business, which is really unheard of. And so I really had to put on my salesman hat to get this one closed, go through all the due diligence, of course. And so so this was September 2020. So just getting into the rhythm and routine of COVID lockdowns and, kind of this new normal, which, looking back is pretty crazy time to buy a business. A lot of people talk about, getting through COVID, and we thought, we'll just make the biggest, purchase of our lives and the biggest life-changing decision, in the midst of all this, why not? And so we did that and started learning the business, right? And so the core of the business is cleaning. What attracted us to the business initially was that it did not deal with guest services. So we say our company is called Apex Property Care, and we do all the back end management. So we do cleaning, landscaping, maintenance, snow removal, subcontractor management, and private home management. So people that don't rent their homes out. So that puts us in a unique place in the market where our competitors are, the big companies that do everything, right? They do guest services, they do, everything on the ground as well. And then we compete against the single service operators, the single service like cleaning, landscaping, all of those individuals. So when we look at that dynamic in the competitive market, it's always really interesting, and we have to be careful how we approach that because the competition is very diverse in that, right? So we got into that. The initial excitement was to jump right into marketing and take what we saw as a mom and pop operation, into the 21st century and really start getting our ideal client, right? And so in doing that, we would start this project and then something would come up. Oh, wait, there's an operational glitch or a fire that had to be put out. And then we put that out, we get back into the project, right? Okay, we're going to set up marketing. We're going to set up, this and that. Another fire would come up. Quickly, we realized there was this lack of systemization throughout the business. And so we really took a step back and said, look, we need to treat this like a startup and build this from scratch, make sure all the pieces align and, do this the right way. So that's when we reached out to eMyth. They got us connected to Matt, and, we've never had a problem since.
Right.
Sure. Right. Yeah. And that bridge you were wanting to sell.
Yeah. What do we even work on in our coaching calls, right? There's no problem at all. It's just so easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what do we talk about?
Yeah. So, great story, great backstory. I appreciate that. What would you say is, what's your biggest obstacle? If you step back and say, what's your biggest obstacle that's standing in the way of the business that you want, the one that you dream of?
Great question. And so when we look back over the last 2 to 2.5 years that we've owned the business, we've gone through different stages, right? And so we can say, oh, at this stage, there was this obstacle. At, this stage, there was that obstacle. And what keeps coming up as a recurring theme is really the structure of it all, right? So when we look at our goals and, 1, 3, 5, 10-year goals, you start to see, okay, there's a pattern of what kind of structure do we need for that? What kind of organization, what roles within that organization, what responsibilities need to be accounted for? And that's to me the biggest obstacle, because number one, it's a moving target. We say, okay, 5 years from now, where do we want to be as a company? And there's that organizational chart you create for that, right? So that you can account for that growth and grow into that. And it's with this multi-system or multi-service business that we have, it can be hard to look into the future and say, here's the exact system that we are going to need. And so to me, it's creating that organizational structure, that's based on efficient communication and, making sure that everything works smoothly.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, and just for the listener's sake on this, is that you do have multiple veins of your business, not just the cleaning part of it. You do the maintenance stuff. You had mentioned that, right? The snow removal. You do maintenance work and like landscaping.
Yes.
Then you also have a laundromat as well too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Am I missing anything else?
No, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So Andrew has a lot of different veins of his business that he uses within that property management sense. I just wanted to be clear about that. So structure, when you're talking about structure, you brought up some good points. You talked about the roles, the responsibilities of those roles. What's been your biggest challenge you called it a moving target. I heard you say it's a moving target. Mm-hmm. What's been challenging about creating that structure when you're thinking that it's a moving target?
Sure. And I'd like to open up and be vulnerable in the fact that, even though I think, 10 years in real estate as a real estate agent and all of my other professional experience, makes me this wonderful leader that, just segues right into the perfect business owner. Right. And the reality is that, it's a very, very different role. And I think, we talk about how, where do you need to be as a leader to get to, this part of your business, or what kind of person do you need to be, to get to this goal or this objective? And I see that more and more. It's like, the more I know, the more I realize what I don't know. And so to me, that, what feels like this organizational structure that should be a very black and white thing feels like a moving target, because as we become more experienced in running this business and all the different interrelated systems, it almost seems like, okay, well, now that we had identified this, let's say this, administrative role, now we're looking at this role and saying, well, there's these three other things that we didn't account for. And so as you go forward, you don't want to create those Frankenstein positions that are just kind of this catch-all. And so then it's like, how much time do you spend working on this org chart? And, is it a once a year thing where you go through and make sure it's on target? And you just start asking all of these questions, right? How do I, do I do this 5-year plan? How do we go from where we're at now to that 5-year plan? And how do we adjust on the way there?
Andrew, you've done a good job at articulating kind of the conceptual struggle that you have, the obstacle, the challenge, the frustration that you seem to be experiencing, and you're characterizing that as looking for structure. I'm curious about two things. First, in what regard? Maybe a little bit more detail on what that structure looks like. Is it structure in the people? You've sort of alluded to that. Structure in the systems, structure in the different departments, and how the finance department works, for example. Sure. So maybe some color to that, and maybe you can illustrate that. Let's go to story time. What's some example that really resonates true with you? Where it became very apparent that that's part of what's missing.
Sure. So where we and this is actually what led us to eMyth originally. So when we bought the company, there appeared to be this this hierarchical structure and a very good way of what would you call it? Like how everybody answered to the right person. It just seemed to flow. And when we got into it with our very different culture that we brought to the table and to the team, we realized that there's things that we didn't bring to the team that the team needed. There was a lot of kind of a dictatorial style, the micromanaging. And we really approached this business as, there should be a lot of autonomy, and things just fell apart. Right. And so then we thought, well, what's going on? This should work. Everybody knows what they should do. And and so then we got back and started thinking and talking. And it's like, man, there's really not any documented structure here. And it's the organizational structure that really is what we're talking about in this context. And so then we started looking at, okay, well, you start, at least traditionally, it's a top down. It's like, okay, well, there's, we have these two managers. One's in charge of all the cleaning and all the, kind of the concierge side of things. And then one is in charge of landscaping and maintenance and snow removal. It's like, okay, great. We'll start there. Well, it turns out, those positions really were Frankenstein positions. And so as we dug deeper, it became clear to us. It's like, okay, well, we really need to step even further back. And, it's like, we went to, ground zero, right? It's like, who are we as a company? What are we doing? And then we got to a point where it's like, why are we doing this? Right. And so, again, we got into eMyth, started unpacking that. And, over the course of about 6 to 7 months, we started going over that organizational side and started getting more clarity. And then we grew as owners, learned more, learned the business, and then it's like, okay, well, there's something else here that we need to implement. And yeah, it's just that continuous workflow there.
So some of the challenges that you were experiencing, they were like quality control issues, missed appointments, people going to the wrong properties, taking the wrong equipment, inefficiencies.
Yeah.
Like some of those specifics?
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention is that when we bought, leading up to buying the business, it was about a 2-month time period. So there's a lot of side stories here, but I was a business broker for about 4 months before buying this business. And, the number one rule of business brokers is don't buy businesses. You just broker the sales, right? Don't get sucked into, seeing the numbers and analyzing them and buying yourself. And so, third, fourth business in, oh, let's buy this thing, right? So we went into this very confidently, thinking, okay, let's see what others have done and rinse, repeat, do the same thing. So what that looked like was putting a management team in place. So we hired a COO who was going to essentially run that business so that we could focus on, growing the business. So that operations side, and then we would be kind of that more traditional CEO or CMO.
Sounds good.
And so, yeah. So in theory, it sounds good. Well, what happened was we inadvertently created a very flat org structure. So at the time we had 14 employees, and this COO became the boss to those 14 employees. And so she had people calling, texting all day long. And so it was just communication overload. So, some of the projects that she was tasked with just never got done because, she was the receptionist. She was the boss of 14 people. She was learning a new company. I mean, we really, and ultimately, a year later, we mutually made the decision that this wasn't working. And, we set her up for failure. You can pretty easily see that in this context. And so, so once we did that, it's like, okay, let's really start taking these pieces apart and see, learning each role ourselves and then delegating that appropriately. And Matt and I talk about, the abdication versus delegation. It's just like for a year, we essentially, just said, oh, do this, do that. And just like, okay, great. That was it. And it's like, wait, 2 years into this, it's like, how do we ever think that would work? It's like, number one, there needs to be more leadership support, but there needs to be that accountability system as well, is what we found. And so the main issue that we saw through all of those situations was that this communication was broken.
Yeah, I want to dig in a little bit on that real quick, just for some context. Who wants to explain the difference between abdication versus delegation and why it matters?
I simply put it as this way: is delegation is where you're clear about what you're handing off to somebody. This is how I want it to be done. This is the job. These are the tasks, so on and so forth. Abdication is here, generally you kind of do what you want. I don't want to be bothered with it. That's my very simple way of putting it. Do you have more of a professional tone to that, Dan?
Abdication involves just washing your hands of the responsibility of what you've delegated. And, healthy delegation doesn't work that way. You still have to keep your finger on the pulse. You still might need some indicators to be able to verify, validate what's getting done and how it's getting done. Abdication says that's not my job anymore. And, again, it doesn't necessarily work that way. You can't wash your hands of it per se. You still need to have some way of verifying and validating what's getting done, how it's getting done, the quality, et cetera.
I think it's interesting in your story right there, as I reflect on it, Andrew, is you came into the business and kind of had what is more of I'll say an employee mentality, or somebody like yourself is a self-starter and is a hard worker. I mean, you even said, if you grew up in the, if you broke it, you fix it kind of way, this kind of personal responsibility of doing things. And you took over the business and kind of maybe made the assumption that others should be that same way too. So you're like, all right, hands off, you guys know what you're doing. It'll be good. It'll be fine. Right. And that's been a theme in our work a little bit as we've gone through it. And it has taken a while to shift to that. But it's interesting because what I heard was that it was micromanaging before. Well, the micromanaging even of itself was one person held that knowledge. One person kept the whole pieces together, which is more of what your COO position kind of became for you. Right. So you kind of brought it back into the fold, right? And then realized that was kind of an overwhelming catch-all position. And now you're in a place to recognize the different parts and pieces and the roles and responsibilities in that structure and what each part of your business is meant to do to function, be able to really get to a point where it doesn't land on just one person. And ultimately, the big goal is that it's not just dependent on you to keep it all together as well, right? Is that a pretty good synopsis of it? Is that what you picked up too, Dan?
Exactly.
Yeah, man, I would, it just generates a question for me. So what I'm hearing is that your team was unclear about what needed to be done and how we do it. Would you say that extended to ownership and leadership as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I loaded your question there.
Yeah. And it's absolutely true. And I'll be the first to admit it, and I think a lot of this autonomy and the idea of it came from, I had always worked in a field of people that were responsible for their own businesses, right? Which is real estate agents. And so, we all know there's a wide range of, wonderful real estate agents and real estate agents that get into it. And it's a very different reality than what they had imagined. And so, for me, it was like my normal was, you have, 4 years of experience or 7 years of experience cleaning. Like, you tell me how this should be done. Like I wanted to be that, kind of that dream manager, and give people really a kind of a piece of the pie to say, okay, look, like, here's how we should do things, and having that respect. And, turns out people really wanted that structure, and it's shocking. I'm like, wait, what?
So I'm loving the context and the backstory here for this, but if you don't mind, I want to get our hands dirty here. You obviously have done something right. I mean, come on, you were working with Matt for a while, so something's going right here. You're still alive and kicking, but a business is a never-ending succession of improvement, or at least hopefully. And so here's my question: What's present today? What's actually happening today that shows there's still work to be done here?
So one of the, and Matt will tell you, one of the things that we decided to do was, and it's kind of this classic business owner, right? It's like, oh, well, if they can't do it right, I got to do it myself. And we really took that in, but part of that was that learning, right? And like you said, there was a big part of the company and the business and the operations that we just really didn't understand. And so, was there a better way to go about that than just doing the tasks? Absolutely. And so where we're at now is we're, I'm still doing some of the field work, and we're in this hybrid scenario. So we have one person that goes through all the scheduling, handles our accounts payable, receivable, and answers all the phones, or the phone. And we have a maintenance manager who is in charge of landscaping and maintenance. And so, we look forward as, okay, is this the right setup? What do we need to support those positions? Do those positions need to be broken down? And, we certainly have a direction that we think we're going. But some days we look back and we say, is this the right direction? Do we add, this office position to support, client, let's say client satisfaction to make sure that, we're meeting our promises on time and consistently. Do we need more XYZ on the maintenance side? And then where are there, synergies that we can say, okay, here's a common theme that all of our service lines are showing. Is there one person that can service that same need for the entirety, of all of those service lines? And so that's where we start getting confused, where we say, okay, how have others done it, right? You Google, you look at, different articles and published docs, and you go through and it's like, okay, well, here's, for a cleaning company, here's this. For a landscaping company, here's this. For eight landscapers, you need one office person and one part-time and this and that. And so, we kind of take all of that and say, okay, now here's our, current problems that we're working with. You have an owner that is overly involved in the field work, which then on the back end isn't able to support the high level positions in the direction and, really in the direction that they need. So that's where you get this kind of this washing machine of, slow progress, and then a couple steps back and 3 steps forward. And so that's where we say, okay, how can we break this cycle to say, look, let's not just take a bite of one project and then save it for later. If we're going to do something, let's commit to it and grow that in a way that people don't get burned out and, lead to that high turnover rate that we fight sometimes.
Do you guys have an org chart, and is it clear?
We do. Is it clear? No. What would you say, Matt?
It's not bad. I think where the work that you've been working on more than anything else is in the definitions of those positions is really where we've gotten stuck with it. Yeah. There's been some really good clarity on some of them. It's the mapping of them all out and then seeing how they interrelate that I think is the sticking point. And I think that's one, from my perspective of being your coach, that's where that clarity will come from for you, is really when you can get to the point of defining them and seeing how they marry or relate to one another within the entire picture right there. But I honestly think you did fantastic work on that piece right there. What is it about the org chart to you, though, that you feel like isn't finished? You said maybe it's good.
Yeah. And we've touched, we had touched on this a while back. So one of the issues that we fight, and I think is very relatable, is if you have this question, if you had all the money in the world, or if you had all the resources, or this or that, we would hire all of these non-revenue producing positions and just rock and roll, right? And we're fortunate that we have very good cash flow, but we start adding up more of these non-revenue producing roles, and that cash flow gets a little tighter. And, we like to have that cushion to make sure that, we're responsible for, everybody's jobs. And so it's like, okay, you got to have, that cash flow, the cash in the bank. So that's where we try to mix that. Okay. How much can we afford to spend on this position? And, can we have that position at all? Right. So, that seems to be my biggest Achilles heel. And I think, as you guys are listening, it's like, it's probably a bit of an excuse, right? Like, if I had more money, right? And so if I went into it deeper, I would say that the confusion is, how do we split? Because let's take it back one more step. So if we start from the bottom, we say, okay, we have somebody that's a snow removal position. That's pretty straightforward. It snows, you clear the snow. A cleaning position, same thing. It's a little more complicated, but they're executing those cleans. And so we have all of those positions. And I think that's very straightforward. So that's where it gets to the next level. And you say, okay, what support do they need from that supervisor position? And I think we have that pretty well down. It's those positions that support those supervisors, and support, me as a CEO and eventually, upper leadership, that where we really kind of get to that muddy water type situation.
Kind of project management. So you're doing pretty good flying there at 30,000 feet. Your employees out there in the field cleaning, they're doing good at feet on the ground, and somewhere in the middle at about 10,000 feet to have the acuity of the big picture, but not so high that they've lost perspective and aren't grounded anymore. So kind of that mid range altitude, if you were to characterize it that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Do you guys have a budget?
We do. That's something that we are. It's not a tight budget. Yeah. Basically, it's lack of tracking on our end. So that's
you have a budget
one.
Went in a drawer and haven't looked at it since.
Yeah, and I'm embarrassed to say it because I've been a business broker and I have looked through records of businesses that are managed like we're managing ours, and it's like, wait, how did you not have this accounted for and this tracked, and so yeah, I feel it.
How often do you review your financials? So the budget is the financial budget is what I was referring to. The financial budget is, I advocate, I don't know about you, Matt, I advocate a 9 to 12 month rolling budget all the time. You've always got 9 to 12 months of visibility in your forecast, right? You need to see that far down the road. But that's the budget for the future. But we've got a rear view mirror, we've got a windshield. And so the rear view is more about the financial reports you run, the profit and loss, the balance sheet. So you're able to see how your performance has been and why. Hopefully, it leaves some breadcrumbs as to why it turned out the way it did. How often do you review those? How often are you looking in the rear view?
Once a month. So we have one of the things that we do well in the absence of doing a very good budget is we have a accounting team that produces that profit and loss, cash flow statement, and balance sheet every month. So.
And you do look at those regularly?
We do, yes.
Cool.
Yeah. The profit and loss, 100% every single month. Yep.
Right on. And do you compare it, the budget versus actual? There's so much to finance in the discipline. So do you look at the budget and say, all right, here's what we predicted. How'd that shake out? And kind of do a postmortem, Monday morning, watch the game tapes thing and see what actually happened. Where were we right? Where were we wrong? And what are we going to do about it? Do you engage in that?
We don't. And that I think that's crucial because, what are the numbers if you don't, take that next step, right?
Cool. Great. Good to know. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
I'm sitting back and going, what happened? we were working in that area right there.
I know.
It's crucial. It's massive right there. And I'm
what
curious
happened, Andrew? Let's throw it to you, brother. It's your business. What happened? Where did that get off track?
Yeah.
So let me think.
By the way, for a while there, without making excuses for you, I remember you were working with getting caught up for a while, right? Yeah. Wasn't that where it was with this new group that you were with and whatnot? But yeah, just to go back to Dan's question right there, what happened with the budget? Where'd that go?
Yeah.
Let me put this in the side notes here for everybody that is listening that doesn't know my style, Matt's style. This is a shame and blame free zone. I have a very dear friend. If he's listening right now, he'll get a kick out of this. Nobody goes to rehab sober is what he says. And for people who are getting business coaching, people who are seeking help, your shit is sideways and you're just like every other business owner out there. And that's okay. The point is you're here doing something about it. And so there's no room for shame and blame. That's not productive. It's not constructive. The question that sort of like pokes a hole in that is to say, great. Do you know what got you here and what are you going to do about it? So that's a great way to sort of let the air out of the shame and blame balloon and move forward. So I just want to kind of give that context for when I'm like, so Andrew, how did this get off track? This isn't laced with shame and blame. This is diagnostic. I want to throw that out there.
I appreciate that. And Matt knows I love some of this inflection and looking back and saying, okay, what happened and what's going on. And then, sometimes we get into that dialogue where it's like, okay, well, let's get back to the topic here. This is really where we're looking at. And so when I look back, we bought the company, we started focusing on marketing. We went back, we started focusing on operations, and we've really been in that operations mode ever since. And then from there, we try to, in that time frame, we try to fit in, like we were mentioning, right? It's project here, it's project there. And so one of those projects was accounting. We started getting, we started doing our own accounting. And, one thing that Texas does very well is they support business owners. I mean, I've lived in 2 states, so I don't have much to talk about, but much better than Colorado. That's one thing I can say negative about Colorado. And so we got into this, and there's really not any, big resource that Colorado gives you. It's like, all right, here's colorado.gov. And, make sure you do everything you're supposed to. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Right. And so we started doing our own accounting, and we'd get a letter back from, okay, the workers' compensation, needs to be adjusted this. And, the IRS is sending, these accounts aren't quite right. So we need to change this, EIN number and this and this. And so it was more and more of that. So it's like, okay, we have to get a professional accounting company. And this company does our taxes, they do payroll and bookkeeping. And so it's really, they do a really good job. They're single track accounting. Awesome. So that was the beginning of our journey. They got into it, and they're like, oh, there's a lot of cleanup here, right? And they're like, we don't want to, hurt your feelings, but like, this is really bad. We're like, look, you're not going to hurt our feelings. We know it's bad. Let's just, what's it going to take to get us there? So ultimately, they ended up doing our 2021 return and getting all of our books right. And they did such a good job that we sheepishly asked them to clean up the 2020 as well, which they did. And I mean, it's been smooth sailing on that side ever since. And so we were so excited because we thought, look, this is the next step to get us where we need to be, which is tracking, budgeting, and, seeing where those gaps are and going through that iteration cycle. And the reality is that we just never got there. So then we get into eMyth, right? And it's such a good structured system of going through and really identifying where you need to work on your business and what needs to be optimized. And so we get into the financial section, and it's wonderful, right? It's like, okay, here's the structure we needed. Here's what we do. Make sure we're getting, the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statements. Great, we're doing that already. And guess what? Right back into operations. And this becomes that little project on the side. So that, I'd love to be more specific. That's about as specific as I can remember. I'm sure there's things that, maybe you guys could point out or Matt could remember, but yeah, it's just kind of that reactive versus proactive.
I'm thinking about your challenges with the org chart and tying that to the budget, because that's how we got here, right, Dan?
Yeah.
We were talking about clarity of the org chart, who to hire, when to hire, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Who's going to do what, these non-revenue producing positions. What do you think in your mind's eye then, that what Dan was alluding to was asking about the budget? What might that provide for you if you had some clarity on that, if you had some concrete budgets in place?
We would know And this is where I have what feels like an excuse, but it's more of a question. So it would provide us the clarity to know what we can afford and what we can't, period. Right. Where I have the question is, and I think I just answered my own question. So you have, a very different the sales cycle, right? Throughout the year. And if you tracked and you budgeted, you would see the patterns and you would be able to budget. So that's my excuse / question that I answered myself. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where I get hung up, where it's like, oh yeah, if I could budget, I knew there was going to be $100,000 of revenue every month. Oh, great. Yeah. Very predictable. But it's going to be work to go through a year and say, okay, this is what we can expect in March as we're starting to buy new equipment for the summer season, and expect here in this month and X, Y, Z. So, and the reality is that we had those breakdowns from the prior owners. And so all the way up to the sale, we had that clear data, and then it's blank, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then really our budget and our financial data is, how much were we left with at the end of the month, which is not a very good lead measure to make those hiring decisions on, which, we go back to, well, can I afford this role, right? And it's all tied together.
Really well put. I'm going to summarize just kind of what we've covered so far and what I'm hearing. Do you guys mind?
No, please.
What I'm hearing, Andrew, is as you're maturing as a business and as leaders, and you're starting to get clearer piece by piece about what kinds of changes you guys feel like you need to make in your business. I mean, you got a good beat on the systems or the people or the structure that is required. But before you can really answer that question, there's this bottleneck of how do we know what of these changes we can afford to make and where to start on that, right? Am I kind of summarizing that right?
100%. Yeah.
So in order to make those assessments, kind of bring it back to that finance piece. And you say you're already reviewing the finance, and that's, like I was alluding to, that's kind of the rear view. You need that. But for the next 3 months, can we afford to pay this contractor to come in and do special projects work for this? Can we afford that project manager to be that mid-level 10,000 foot altitude person? Can we afford? That's the bottleneck right now. Like if you had a magic wand, and I heard you say not the magic wand thing, but if we could just go on a hiring frenzy, this stuff would be good. But you don't know, you can't do the hiring frenzy, of course. Nobody really can do that at scale. So to make that assessment, what's your prescription there? What do you need to do?
We need to go back and, catch up on that tracking and put it into a usable format that we can then create that forecast. And then we create that system of accountability for the budget and predictability for what we can do and afford and move forward.
Do you know what that looks like? Do you know how to get there? What I'm getting at is I hear that you're willing to do that. Are you able to do that? Like you have the tools, you got the skills, you got the knowledge, you got the equipment, you got the people to run the reports, and they're going to be up to date and reliable.
Here's where I feel there's the gap. So, and I think, Matt with his background in the gym industry can relate. There's the, this pain that is right in front of you, right? I'm really hungry, and the closest thing to me is 5 fast food restaurants. And if I just, spent 15 minutes, I could get a really healthy meal or make a really healthy meal. And that's this conundrum I feel like I'm in with the business, where there's people that need support or direction, or that happens enough and you realize they need a clearer week view of what they need to do every day, right? And so that's where I feel like I get sucked back into, where the question of, will you do this? And what's your capability of being able to do this gets called into question, because there's this need of, and the fear of, okay, well, if I don't do these all this financial work, yes, there's going to be some long-term pain. If I don't do this, if I don't put out this fire, there's going to be short-term pain that could lead to long-term pain. Right. And so and we've gone through that in several different areas of the business. Right. And said, okay, we know that we need this system. We know that we need this. And as this, multi-hat wearing owner, it's like you feel like, oh, I have to do this for this manager, so that they don't quit, or, there's these fears, right? So I think that's where I feel like I am now.
What I find is interesting is that you've been super diligent about all the rear view mirror, as Dan references, right? And that's great. And I'm wondering, is there some resistance to the future looking into the budget plans? I don't know if there is or not, but
yeah,
is there something holding you back with that? Because what I'm trying to tie that to is that, and we've talked about this before, is you get into that mode of reaction. Just like you said, it's just easier to go to Burger King. Just, here's this fire. I'm going to move. And that always holds you back from being able to look more into the future in the plan ahead. So is this a theme in some ways? Because there's a way that you have lived within this business and identify even with yourself. I mean, the same statement of, hey, if it's broke, you go ahead and fix it yourself, that doer mentality with it, is that holding you back from that potential of being able to think into the future in some way? Or is there some resistance because one's kind of feels like it's at home for you? Kind of a loaded question. I know there's a lot of pieces to it, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, opening up and being vulnerable, on my end, I have struggled with anxiety and depression for a couple decades, really. And, I go back and I look at, all of the things that really held me up in the past, and I see that now. Right. And it's not related to these, mental health issues, or any of those cues or issues. It's now it's like, okay, well, why don't I want to look at the budget? Why don't I want to do this? And there's the fear of like more work that doesn't get done. Right. And it's, I guess, yeah, I mean, it ties right. I mean, there's these anxieties, really, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, okay, well, what's the resistance here? Yeah.
Let me riff on that. Can I riff on that real quick?
Absolutely.
There's something about reactionary work. I love where you're going with that, Matt. When you're going and you're putting out fires, you know how to put out fires. You're not going to be wrong when you spray water on the fire and the thing goes out. Congratulations, success. You did a good job, Andrew, right? Proactive work, strategic work, planning into the future. You make plans, that stuff's not going to work out. You just count on it. It's not going to work out exactly as you plan. Hopefully you get close. That's intimidating. That's threatening. That contributes to the anxiety and the depression when your stuff doesn't work out. So you got a sure thing. It's a ringer when you're putting out the fire. That's going to be a success, but you have to predict on a budget and financials. It's not going to turn out that way. It's just like, I can tell you right now, never seen a single budget come out even like ridiculously close to the way the budget went up. But you have to have something, right? Yeah. Even if the crystal ball is fuzzy, you gotta pull it out and do your best with it. Do you think is there anything that rings true for you that way about like I'm going to talk a little esoterically here about that, but your relationship to firefighting versus the relationship to planning and trying to manifest what those plans are, hit those goals, make those targets come true?
Absolutely. As it's that instant gratification trap, right? I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Well, what are you doing? Oh, well, I don't remember. Right. And it's like, Well, the truth is that you were doing all of these little things that weren't planned and don't really have, any space, that shouldn't have any space in your calendar. And that's a lot of what my day looks like. You start out the week, here's this plan, and something comes up and it's like, oh gosh, I got to go fix this, or I got to go do this. And, I can move this and this unbelievably important thing into the strategy side. And I can do that tomorrow because nobody's breathing down my neck to get it done. And so it's like, okay, I can get everything done if, I could just move this to tomorrow. Well, guess what? Tomorrow there's more reactionary fires and there's more, there's all this stuff to deal with. And so, Matt has been really good by saying, look, you have to hold these times sacred, right? That's the only way that it works, right? You have to find that time. And this was actually last week, I think, Matt, right? Where it's like, look, here's the time we spend, every week. And I was fighting with him, it's like, oh, could we do 3 days a week? And he's like,
negotiating. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like, I have a 1-year-old son, and I'm doing this field work that requires me to be out, on random days and random times. And so, holding that time sacred is difficult, but clearly it's one of the number one, priorities. Because
Can I add some color? Can I add some color to that story, though, to give it a little backdrop of where that came from? If I remember this correctly, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but things had kind of crescendoed, and the patterns that we've seen in some ways was that there's reactive stuff that you have that comes up, but on top of that, there's been choices and decisions to take on projects that are bigger projects, right? At the same time, so you're like, oh, we'll have a little bit of space, or I have an idea. I'm going to do the office. I'm going to take on this other thing. I'm going to do this one thing. And then the reaction stuff piles on top. And then we have those sessions where they're like, wow, I'm just overwhelmed. You get on the phone, you're drained and you're worn out from it all, and those are great reflective moments because we go, okay, well, how do we make this different next time? And how do we make this different next time? And I think to wrap some of this up that I'm kind of hearing and tie it all together is going back to the budget plan. How much does that forethought, how does looking more forward into what's coming up, monetarily or just in general, like how does that help to get you to a place where you can avoid those periods where you come into just this, I've taken on too much. I've taken on a project that I maybe could have afforded because I made it happen, but at the same time, I couldn't afford it because of the time and energy placed into that. Now I can't afford thinking ahead. Right.
Yeah. And it's I think for me, hearing you explain that and pose that question, it's like, man, it's so clear that it's an action reaction cycle, right? Because if you knew that forecast and that budget, and you at least understood within a 10 to 20% range of, okay, here's what we're shooting for, here's what we've been doing, and you can make that plan. The reactionary, the fires, the surprises start going down on that's what I'm seeing. And I'm kind of, missing a lot of steps there to simplify it, but that's, it's
I got to put this in here because I know you're a skier and we can edit this out if this doesn't apply to this. But one of the lessons I learned with skiing, mogul skiing, that I was taught was when I was skiing with my instructor, we actually paid for somebody to help me out with this, right? At one point, he says, you're looking down at your skis. You're looking down at your skis. Look 5 to 7 moguls ahead of you. And I'm telling you, like I took a shift. This was one of these like 20%, 30% shifts in my skiing ability just from that cue alone, right? Yeah. What's your 5 to 7 moguls, man? Right?
Yeah, and on our end, with those different service lines, they all follow the same pattern. It's when do the tourists come? When does the grass grow? When does the snow fall?
And
right?
so does the budget to a degree, right? I mean, to a degree, like Dan says, it's never perfect, but the weighing against the cyclical nature of your business and weighing against that, your plan of it is where you compile that 5 to 7 moguls ahead, right? You know, the pattern of moguls are a little different all the time, right? But overall, it's similar enough.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off though.
I'll dork out on that a little bit because we've focused on the the financial budget piece, and I would even extend that out to say there's value, and this will be our next session. There's value to a time and attention budget as well. What's all the stuff that you have to commit to in the next 30 days, next quarter, the next year? What are those commitments that are hard and fast? And in the same way that you would with finances, if you realize you're going to have X dollars available to you to spend, what is you can't spend it on those things over there because it's got to be dedicated to these things over here instead. Time and attention works exactly the same way. In fact, even more so. It's even more finite than money. Hell, you could go make more. It might not be easy. You could go make more money if you needed to. Time, you got, what is it, 1,440 minutes a day, right? That's the ceiling. And in light of that, trying to pile more on your plate to go spend more, again, whether it's time and attention or it's money, if you don't have that visibility of what's coming up, you're going to blow through your budget. And that's the time and attention that allows you to, sure, dedicate some time to firefighting, dedicate time to reactionary and responsive work, because that's the reality. We have to give that a little bit of love, but making sure that you've got some still in the tank, you've got some reserved to work on the strategic, higher level, proactive work. Exactly the same with finance. Time and attention budget, financial budget, both of those seem like the bottleneck. Like man, you just seem so smart and attentive and caring in the way that you approach your business. And it's a constraint of resources, time, money, and attention. And if you could be a little bit clearer on, 5 to 8 moguls ahead of time, attention, and money, I have no doubt that's to me sounds like the obstacle that needs to be cleared. What's going to be available to you in the short and midterm, so that you can spend it right. Then you can get to hiring the person that you need and training them. Then you can get to creating this system or this project manager or this structure to make sure that jobs aren't missed and quality control is maintained and all of that. But until you realize what you've got to spend and throw at those issues, damn, that's a bottleneck, isn't it?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? If I'm wrong, just please tell me. How about this? How about we tie it up with this? So if we were to get precise with the problem, which is my mantra, if anybody knows me at all, get precise with the problem. What specifically is the obstacle? I threw that out there a minute ago about getting clear on and piggybacking off of Matt's analogy there about 5 to 8 moguls ahead. That seems like the bottleneck here for you to be able to make some progress, Andrew. And so if you can think of something more precise to identify as the obstacle that needs to be cleared to get you some of that traction right away, clarify what that is. But if that's it, let's dork out a little bit on what you can do to next steps you can take in order to address that. Thoughts on that? Anybody have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of writing through that and looking. And I think there's probably more steps in there to explore, but then you kind of start opening up other doors, right? And it really starts. I think it could get convoluted. I could be completely wrong, but I think I'm with you on that process.
So what is the clear, what would you call it, Dan? In the crystal clear obstacle, or what did you say?
Oh, just getting precise with the problem before
precise.
If you're not precise with the problem, you're going to start solving a problem. It's going to be the wrong one. And now you're actually 2 steps behind because you expended those resources solving the wrong shit. And that's not useful.
Yeah.
So as precisely as possible, you almost have to take inventory. It sounds like to me, take inventory of the time and attention you have, as well as the financial future for the next 3, 6, 12 months, whatever that looks like. What do you have available to you to spend to solve these problems? Then you can get to work on solving them. But until then, you don't even know, what's in your suitcase.
Absolutely. I mean, it's to me on my end, I'm looking at number one, going back to basics, right? We hold that time every week. You tackle these problems. I mean, there's a point where it becomes, a long-term problem becomes the short-term problem. And it's pretty clear that's where we're at with this obstacle.
Mm-hmm. I love how you said that.
Agreed.
No, go ahead, Dan.
Agreed. Can you take little bites out of that? I mean, what's a simple act that you can start to make sure you've got this time? Do you keep a calendar? How rigid are you with that, man?
I do. I use Google Calendar. I mean, it's pretty loosey goosey.
I was going to say, is there a suggestion or is it structure?
It's throughout last fall, I'll be honest. I mean, I was missing appointments to get a haircut. I was, and it's just simple, very basic things. It's like, oh man, like, how do we get here? And so, I look at it and I say, okay, there's several different ways to go at this. What method, like you mentioned, what method am I using? Google Calendar, making that space, right? It's the schedule, but how am I going to make sure that gets done? Right. Like where's that gap?
For me though, like, I think we talked about this too, Andrew, and Dan, please jump in too if you disagree with it too. It's the motivation to hold that time is really where I would go with, right? Is that because you often do have that time, not all the time, but you do have that time. But why would you do so? Like, how do you intend to frame that hour of working on the business and say, hey, this is a priority, though it's not a fire, though it's not an urgent matter, it is the long-term picture. Because when you have that connection to the motivator right there, then you do it. Obviously, like, you're good at that stuff because something comes up and like, boom, I go and do it, right? Because I've got the motivation to fix it. So how do you treat this almost in the same way that says this is a priority, though it's not on fire? How do I do that? And I think that's where I kind of would go with that, is how do you put that same level of prioritization mentally on that time? Dan, interrupt if you want, if you think that's the wrong vein.
No, I think you're spot on. You got a 1-year-old, Andrew, and nobody wants to ever change a diaper, right? I mean, come on, get real. But it's a non-negotiable for you. Do you have to gin yourself up to go change the diaper? No, you're like, of course. I mean, it's non-negotiable. It's that important. My values are that clear. Shout out to a really good book, a guy named Ben Hardy. It's called Willpower Doesn't Work. And I'm kind of bastardizing his great approach to this. But when your values are excessively clear, you don't need the willpower for it. And same with this. If you're clear enough that this is an action that you need to take on your on how you address your calendar, more as structure than suggestions. If it's that clear, you don't have to gin yourself up to get that done. You just realize and recognize this is non-negotiable. This is the diaper change for the day, and I'm going to do it because it's clear this thing stinks, and I don't want to miss another haircut appointment. I don't want to, whatever that is. Not to mention just the longer term value that you'll get for your business, because you'll put in that critical mass of strategic work to make those assessments, make those changes.
Yeah, and I think ironically, when I look at, okay, well, let's address this, it goes back to the financial, right? Where it's like, okay, we're making it real right now is, spending more time with my son and having the money that we need to be comfortable, right? And then the money we desire to get to that goal that we want, right? And money, time, and then you're working with a pretty good problem, right? And so how does that fit in when you say, okay, my motivation to do the financial comes from knowing that here's the gap, and and I think I'm in that point where, oh, well, I've never done a budget, but, we've always made it work, kind of a thing. Right. And it's crazy to me. Like, that's been our reality, but it is nuts that because I mean, that's how people go out of business, because they just don't know their numbers.
Absolutely.
And so I think, switching from that lucky to, okay, let's be good, not lucky, is important. So yeah, with that, yeah, knowing the numbers to have that, to find that motivation. But honestly, I mean, how far do we want to go into that part of things?
I think, what you've done. God, I'm just full of bumper stickers today. What got you here won't get you there. And if you could fly by the seat of your pants in your finances and just, you'll wing it, you'll make it. That has worked just fine to this point, right? You've gotten that. You've gotten this far from that relationship to that kind of structure. But for the next chapter here, that's your ceiling. And until you clarify for yourself, like it's almost like just your relationship. You got to be able to emotionally draw a straight line from, I'm gonna keep this appointment to review my budget versus actuals every month on the 10th, because I can draw a straight line from that activity to being able to spend more time with my kid and my wife, and more time on the slopes, or whatever that is, right? Retire before I'm 70, whatever that you can. We know, we're just sitting here on this go, we can draw a straight line from that. It's not convoluted. It's not in question. There's no doubt about it. And when you can be that clear on the non-negotiability of those appointments, again, that's where you don't even need the willpower. You don't have to, it's just clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'll be the first to say it, having kids is so much harder than I expected. I mean, I only have one, it's like, man, these people are having 2, 3, 4, like how can they do that? Right. And, but it is the most rewarding thing I've ever experienced. And I'm super competitive. I love, playing basketball or run a race or playing poker, it's fun. Right. And you're always testing yourself, and nothing comes close to having a kid. And so, as hard as it is, and all this extra work that comes with it, also comes an insane amount of motivation and this responsibility. Right. And I think I speak for a lot of people where, when we say, like, oh, I've got to spend more time with my kids, I've got to do this. But then we get into work or whatever that task is, and we kind of forget that. Right. And I think, when you don't have kids, or there's not something, big that you're shooting for, again, you don't have that vision, you don't have that goal. It's really easy to forget about, okay, well, I don't want to do this hard thing, or I don't want to do, X, Y, Z. And a lot of times for me, it's subconscious, right? I don't even think about it. I just immediately go put that fire out, even if I'm in the middle of working on, it's something that is, very significant, right? So yeah, drawing that line.
For sake of time, but also I think we're at a good place in general. What are the takeaways? Because we worked through a lot. It took this interesting little journey through this, and I appreciate your patience with it all. As we both, this is new to us with the podcast stuff too, but not new to coaching. So I appreciate you going this journey with us. What are your takeaways? What are you going to take from? What did you take from today, and what are you going to work to apply tomorrow, 3 months from, for the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever?
I'm responsible for, essentially everything in the business, but I don't have to do everything in the business. And so for me, I look at, we go through, we say, okay, well, there's things that aren't getting done. Oh, we need to hire somebody. Well, we don't know our financials. That needs to be done. Why is that not getting done? Well, we're not holding that space to get that done. Why are we not holding the space to get that done? And then it comes back to, okay, we're not clear on our future. We don't have that goal, and we're just doing the busy work. And so, I mean, I think it just goes back to, a very basic but powerful concept of like, you gotta keep your vision in mind, right? And everybody has, you have all the gurus that have the different ideas, right? Oh, you have to have the vision board. Oh, you have to have the millionaire morning routine to keep you on your goal, and you have to do your work before 8 a.m. Don't open your email, all of that stuff. But the reality is that you just have to keep working towards your goal, and hold that time to make sure that you're building those blocks and not just digging in the sand endlessly. So
I want to add one piece to that, because I know we got to wrap up fairly soon here. But one of the parts of that, the scheduling piece that I tell clients with, and we've talked about before too, Andrew, is in the first part of that hour is trying to connect to what that goal is and what that purpose is. And that hopefully jazzes you, right? Because you're saying, okay, this is worthwhile time. As opposed to, I just sit down here and I go, okay, what am I working on? I got to go to work on it. But sitting in the moment of going, what are my goals? What are my ambitions? What are my primary aim or anything else? Where do I want to go? What am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? And having that time of meditation, thought, quiet time, peace, whatever you want to have before you start doing the work. That seems to be a helpful tool. I don't know, Dan, do you have any other takeaways from that too? Any other suggestions?
No, man, I think you covered it really well. And when you've got that hierarchy of from your values and your vision to the goals, to the plan, to the actions that you need to take, and it's almost in that structure. It's part of the annual planning process that I work through with my clients. Clear on your vision and your values. What are the goals, the outcomes that are related to that? What are the individual plans that I need to develop in order to reach those goals? And then what are the daily actions that need to be taken in order to accomplish that plan, to hit those outcomes? When you break that down, kind of reverse engineer it in that way, and you don't need to do this every hour session that you put down on your calendar with yourself, but that's how those actions get excessively clear, is by, again, kind of reverse engineering it, like piggybacking on what Matt said about keeping that vision. I mean, whatever you got to do to keep your finger on the pulse of that, will keep it grounded, keep you motivated, keep you focused on it, get you, as soon as you get distracted, something bright and shiny comes by, or social media or whatever the hell, you're still able to extract yourself from that, because the reason for that is exceedingly clear every time.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Want to make a public commitment about what you're going to do? One specific thing?
Keep my vision in front of me every single place and commit to it. I mean, it's holding that space every single week.
That's worthwhile. Yeah. Well,
I think we're at a place, right?
I think so.
Place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys. I mean, I've enjoyed it. Some of it's been enlightening. Some of it's, obviously some of it was a little tough to talk about as well, right? It's like, wow, I'm just not doing this, right? And Matt knows I've got thick skin, and I'm very like, okay, how do we fix this? How do we do this? How do we do that? Right. So, it was really cool to go through kind of this waterfall of like, okay, well, this led to that, led to that, led to that. And then from there, let's break it down from that to that to that. Okay, here's what we need to do. And then this, then this, then this, right? So yeah, that was really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure as always. Dan, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, just a little shout out for yourself there, Andrew. If somebody wants to, wants to connect with you, and in whatever way, professionally or otherwise, how do they go about doing that?
So the best is my email, andrew@apexsteamboat.com.
Or we'll see you on the slopes. Either way.
There you go. Hit me up.
That's right. Hey, thanks again, Andrew. Appreciate
you guys.
Time.
Nice to meet you, Dan, Noah. Yeah.
We hope you've gotten the value you were looking for on today's episode. If you want more like this, please scan the QR code that you'll find on the show notes, or go to clearingobstacles.com for more information. There, You'll find links to other episodes, as well as how you can get in touch with us to set up your own customized coaching experience on a regular basis to clear your own obstacles. Your business should serve your life, and let us help you get there from here, because nobody should do this on their own. We want to thank you for listening and gratefully acknowledge everyone who helped make this podcast possible, and a special thanks to our Supreme Assistant and Navigator, Noah Wertheiser, to Arctic E for the brilliant musical themes of Clearing Obstacles, and to the team at Hivecast for your amazing work and legendary patience. Thanks for listening.